Is liberty dying where you live? Escape to Keene at freekeene.com.
All right, we're going to kick off the final panel of the afternoon, but it's not the final event because we also have our keynote speaker coming up after this. The president of the Free State Project, Carla Gericke, will be our final speaker of the day. So don't go anywhere, and you're certainly not going to want to miss this panel. Now, at Keenevention, the thing I wanted to focus on was activism. And the Liberty Forum's great, no doubt. I'm going to go this year. I've been every year. Porcupine Freedom Festival is great. But the things that those festivals cover that we don't cover is they have all those other speakers from wherever. All of our speakers have moved to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project or are New Hampshire natives or have lived here for a long time. And so even if you've moved to New Hampshire and then moved out, as two of our next panelists have done, you still qualify to speak at Keenevention because you made the move, you got active, you made your mark here in New Hampshire, and in some cases, you might just be coming back. I know that's the case in Derrick J's case. I hope that Russell Canning will come back and join us. He's nodding. I think that's a good sign. So Russell plans on coming back as well. So Russell Canning, I'll let Derrick do the interview or the introductions here. But for me, whenever Liberty Forum's coming around, and of course I've been asked to put together a civil disobedience panel again, and so it seems like I'm always kind of the go-to guy to be the moderator for the civil disobedience panel. And it's not that I mind doing that job. I thought it would be a good thing to have somebody else do it for once. So Derrick J Freeman, the star of Derrick J's Victimless Crime Spree, which, by the way, I'd like to invite you all. If you haven't seen the movie, you can watch it for free anytime you want over at YouTube. Just go to victimlesscrimespree.com. Or there are $10 director's cut DVDs over there at the registration table. Derrick will sign your DVD if you ask him nicely. And we have a fancy sign-in pen as well. So we got one of those silvery, fancy Sharpies, so it'll look real special. Anyway, Derrick J, thanks for coming, and it's your panel.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ian. Yeah, thanks, everyone. Cool. I'm Derrick J. Right now, I've been busy in the last year doing peacenewsnow.com, covering stories of peaceful resistance. And civil disobedience is one of those things that I always want to keep on my radar. So these people really inspired me to move to New Hampshire. There are a lot more who are some here and some who can't be with us. But I'd just like to start off briefly by having you give your names and tell us what's your relationship to civil disobedience.
Hi, my name's Lauren Canario, and I'm one of the old-timers in civil disobedience in New Hampshire. Wasn't the first, but I was into it back in the 2005 or so.
I'm Ian Freeman, and I moved here in 2006 thanks to the activism of the two folks to the left and the right of me. Big Lauren and Russell, big inspirations on me. But I didn't move here with the intention of doing civil disobedience, but it's a really kind of catchy thing. Once people are doing it around you and you've got people who are standing up for their rights, it's really infectious and you want to join them. So I did, and now I've been arrested 6 times or something like that.
You can tell that obviously none of us have done enough recent civil disobedience because the room's not full of either detractors or followers. I haven't done anything along those lines for a while, but it's fun just to stand up to cops every once in a while, just not bowing down and watching the reactions.
So, Russell, and a question for everybody, and I want to make sure I make it clear that if at any time you have a question for our panelists, feel free to speak up over at the mic. We'll invite questions as they come, but I've got a bunch, and I know we're not going to have enough time to answer all of the questions because this is a really interesting topic. But what's the activism for which you got the biggest response, Lauren?
I guess the biggest response I got was from a big issue was eminent domain was a great big issue in the news back in 2006 with the Kilo versus New London case.
And what was well?
And it seems like with what Lauren did is she was doing some of the stuff that the Kilo. The only reason we even are discussing Kilo is because somebody stood up. I mean, how many families stood up? Otherwise, we wouldn't even be discussing it. People get crushed by eminent domain every day. And it was just that 12 of them said no, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't even be talking about it. And then what Lauren added to it was she brought some physical presence that some other people didn't. Which, and the thing about civil disobedience, it does a couple things. It brings media attention, guaranteed. Usually the media is very friendly to you, despite their normal bias towards the government. And civil disobedience forces people to take sides. I think that's part of the reason why if you take a stand, you force people to choose. Of course, with Keenevention versus New London, who was on the government side? I mean, we're all taking one side.
I don't know if everyone's familiar with that story. Lauren, would you mind briefly recapping what the Kelo decision is and what your involvement with that was?
The city of New London, Connecticut decided to evict a whole neighborhood called Fort Trumbull neighborhood out of their town because the Visor Corporation was headquarters was there, and they were looking out along or into this neighborhood, and they wanted to see something newer, I guess. But the seven homeowners decided not to sell, and they took it to the state or the local court. They took it to the state court. They lost at the local level, at the state level. And they went to the Supreme Court. That's when everyone heard about it in 2005 and 6. And they lost at the Supreme Court, too. The Supreme Court said, oh, yeah, it's okay for you to evict people if you're going to get higher taxes. And so a lot of people didn't like that. And I thought there was a big a protest in New London, 4th of July, I think it was, 2006. And I thought, yeah, that's the place. Look, things are happening. People are standing up. The government's unpopular. I'm going there. I'm going to go make sure that they don't evict those people. And I rented an apartment in the area or in the neighborhood there, and did some monument building sort of, and met everyone and put up a lot of resistance to the people that were trying to take the buildings there.
You were arrested.
A few times, yes.
Okay.
In comic ways, that play, and.
Can you tell us the one that sticks out in my mind, and one of the things that first put civil disobedience even on my radar before the Free State Project was that you had done this, you were sitting on the porch, and that created a really nice visual for folks who saw the video of you sitting on this porch reading a book. Can you just share with us that encounter? Yeah,
that video, it was the day they were coming around to put the boards on the buildings, the unoccupied buildings, and I was just sitting on the porch reading a book, and they told me to leave, but I said, no thanks, I'll just sit here and read my book. And they arrested me and dragged me. When I get arrested, I don't walk with them. I make it plain that I'm not voluntarily leaving with you. And they dragged me across the street and by my knees, I was on my knees.
Now, about that method, about that decision to not use your knees, have you two done that as well?
I have not. I think that if you're a male, it may not go as smoothly. The cops are going to be nicer to a lady, I think, if she does that.
It depends on the situation. I mean, Kat, my wife, she got the feds put her in a county jail, and the county jail people were about to do bad stuff to her, and the fed jailers said, oh no, don't do anything to her because she's just, she hasn't hurt anybody. And then I've had the opposite, where the one time I didn't cooperate with the feds, they hurt me until they're good at that. I mean, they'll hurt me until I do it. Because, are you going to break your wrist? Mm-hmm. I mean, you can't support your whole body on your wrist, and they can make that happen.
Yeah, civil disobedience is risky enough as it is, as far as the amount of jail time you're going to spend.
Everybody does that differently. I mean,
but if you're,
I have a lot of respect for it, though. I really do.
If you're in the frail old lady category, you can push it pretty far.
And what was comical also with Lauren, they were acting like they had hurt their backs carrying you. I mean, it was two large men dragging you. This is not hard work.
How much do you weigh? Not that much.
Yeah, like a little over 100, yeah.
And Ian, what's the civil disobedience for which you got the biggest response?
Well, all right. Do I have to have gotten arrested for it, or is it...
No.
Okay, so I would have to say that the most popular civil disobedience has to be the 420s that happened here in Keene, New Hampshire. I don't claim credit. I wasn't the creator of that. That's Rich Paul, and as I mentioned earlier, you can go and visit him this weekend. He's in jail for selling cannabis. But there were just some epic times here in Keene at Central Square, where Rich and a couple friends went out very quietly, and they started to smoke cannabis in Central Square, and they told other people that they were doing this at 420 on a daily basis, and more people came out the next day. By the end of the week, there were over 100 people in Central Square. Now, not everyone was smoking cannabis, but a good amount of people were, and the police decided they were going to crack down. So I was involved in it by maybe the 5th day is when I caught wind of it. And I was going out daily, and I was a part of this. And the cops came out. They made an arrest. They arrested Rich Paul. And of course, this is how the police work. If you're ever doing anything at all, whether it's a protest or civil disobedience or whatever you're doing, the cops will always come out and they'll say, "Who's in charge?" And they want somebody to target. They want to find out who the leader is, so they can take him out and then demoralize,
or even just negotiate with that person, because they don't know how to deal with a crowd that hasn't asked for permission.
Right, which is why I chose the 420s as an example, because for me the 420 celebrations were an example of the success of civil disobedience, in that there were a couple of arrests, but they didn't stop it. So what happened when Rich got arrested, the police figured, we're going to arrest the leader, and that'll put a stop to this. Well, what actually happened was there were probably 100 plus people in the park. Half of them, with signs and banners and flags and things, marched, because it's Keene, it's not far to the police station. They marched half a mile down the road or whatever to the police station. They went out back behind the police station. There's a no unauthorized access sign as you're going back toward the back parking lot. Everybody went past the no unauthorized access sign, sat in a circle that was about 35 people, and lit up joints and started passing them around. We're literally 20 feet away from the back door of the police station. So, they knew we were there. They knew what we were doing. And we sat there and hung out, and we waited until Rich Paul was processed and released. And he came out, and actually it was Lieutenant Maxfield at the time, who, ironically enough, is a supporter of ending prohibition, but yet he hasn't had the courage to join LEAP. I like Shane. He's a nice guy, but I understand the cops are afraid to do that. So Maxfield comes out, and he's, shooting it with us and talking about drug legalization. So the next day, we go back to the park, because, again, these are happening every single day, and there was as large of a group out the next day as there was the day they arrested Rich, so it didn't deter anybody. They came out again. The police came out again. They made another arrest. I think they made 2 arrests that day, and they were again targeting the people they thought were in charge, so they arrested Evan. And this time, people walked from the park to the police station. They then went inside the police station and proceeded to smoke cannabis in the police station lobby. And that was the win. At that point, the police never came back to, or it was years before they came back to Central Square to mess with anybody again. We literally had a demilitarized zone as a result of a large amount of people being willing to go out and put their freedom on the line. The police tried to crack down. Their crackdowns backfired on them. And finally, they realized, all right, well, we should just, let's make up a story here. And so what they started telling the news media was, there's no one smoking pot in Central Square. We haven't had any reports of pot smoking in Central Square. If we haven't had any reports, we don't need to investigate. So that's the end of the story. So I thought it was a real win, because nobody, even though there were a couple of arrests, we did win that ground, and that was a big deal.
People are going to want to look up some videos of this happening. If people at home are searching out these videos on YouTube, what is it you recommend they search out for those 420 arrests in Keene?
That would probably be at 420 at Keene arrests, or just 420 in Keene. There were countless videos cataloging this, and lots of them are very entertaining.
All right. And Russell, I'd really like to know what you think you got the biggest response on.
Well, the media paid most attention to me going to the airport, and that affected, in some ways. It's hard to tell who you're affecting. Having left and not been around here for a while and coming back, it's amazing how you see who you've affected with little actions. also we've kind of, some of these scenarios also fit the movie, the Gandhi movie, how he says activists come up out of the ground in that movie. You remember that scene where he says, people, you take the steps forward and people will pop out of the ground. I mean, people have followed. We had nothing happening in Keene, and now there's all kinds of stuff happening in Keene. And why? Because a few of us stood up, and it motivates the most exciting people out there too. I mean, that's what, when you're not, and you're talking about people following you that aren't, they're not based on jumping on a bandwagon of success. These are very. There are people ready to go to war and ready to for the hard times, and that's exciting to see people that will follow you. This is the same stories that you read with all the guys in the past, right? This is Tolstoy taught the stuff to Gandhi. Gandhi did the stuff, and then Martin Luther King did that stuff, and all the other guys surrounding all of those people had to do that. They experienced the same stuff, and people pop up. I mean, you read all the stories about how the community would get together for the Montgomery bus strike, what it took to actually physically get through that. It's fun reading all the stories if you can get a hold of stories about civil disobedience, because there's not very much literature on the subject, but it is exciting because it's a rough life for people to choose. I'm just not man enough to do it every day or as much as I should, because otherwise we'd have done more.
So I'd like to speak to that. You can only go so far with it. I mean, as Derrick J learned, he stacked charges on top of charges, and things became quickly overwhelming. And you can stack charges all at once, and then things become real problematic quickly. Or over time, even if you spread your civil disobedience out, after you get arrested once, the courts can use that as you've got a criminal record, we're going to hit you with a harder, set of penalties. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why having waves of activism, you were kind of the first wave, and then I might be the second wave, and Derrick J might be the third wave of people who've kind of come in and kind of picked up the mantle of civil disobedience and run with it.
Yeah, because it gets easier over time, because, I was doing stuff and Lauren was doing stuff right at the same time and things like that, and then it brings other stuff. And it's amazing how it affects so many people, whether it's the videos, whether it's whatever, because civil disobedience makes people choose, and it's powerful. It makes your relatives choose. It makes every person you meet choose, the government or you. I mean, that's the fun of it. I mean, there's lots of pain involved, but it's very powerful.
Had you been involved with civil disobedience before you moved to New Hampshire?
For me, we came up with these kinds of ideas, Dave Ridley and my wife and I, when we were sitting here with the Free State Project. Okay, so here we are. When I came here, there was probably 75 people, and we were going to parties with each other. So we were kind of looking at each other going, so now what are we going to do? So after we watched the Gandhi movie, we went, we can do that. Because one person can do it.
75 people statewide, you mean?
Yeah, that's all. I mean, we all used to get together for parties all together.
Right.
Now there's so many people you can't even possibly know them all. I don't know half the people in this room, so we used to all know each other, and half the people were and half the Free Staters will say we are idiots and ruining it for them, and half of them think that this is the most powerful thing that we can do. Oh, do we have our first question?
Oh yeah, sure, go for it.
I've never been fully arrested. Like, they tried to play at it once, but it wasn't really. What happens if you refuse to give your fingerprints or your name or anything like that? Like, what happens if you just say no?
Lauren?
The mental ward. They put you in the mental section of the prison.
They did this all the way back to Vietnam era. They used to say you were crazy, and then they'll start drugging you. I mean, the possibilities of evil are really bad. In some ways, one quick thing I would say too is when you're doing civil disobedience, it's mostly your attitude before it. So you never know what's going to happen, right? You don't know what's going to happen with all the specifics, but we could also talk about all the very specifics. I've had bad things happen to me because I won't fingerprint. I've had bad things happen to me because I won't answer one question. But then later, they would feel guilty about it. I mean, I wouldn't tell them one time one little piece of information. So then I went back in shackles and went into solitary. Well, then within 2 or 3 days, they're begging me
Yeah.
to give them info. And the other people in jail couldn't believe it. They look at me as the most powerful person in the jail, locked in a cell, because I thought it was a shrink coming to beat me, and it was the superintendent of the jail coming and begging me to do stuff. And then they dragged me to the front and said, "Well, you're never going to get out of this jail unless you answer these questions." And I said, "Yeah, I kind of doubt it, because I was just there for Fed holding." So then you put the government people in bad situations. And then Lauren has tested it. How far can you go not talking? So she
how far can you go? That was my my objective when I went into the state prison. I said, okay, what if I don't say anything? What if I don't do anything that they tell me to?
Do you have a right to remain silent?
Yeah. And they put me in solitaire, and they put me in the mental thing, but they never actually, they knew that I was there for ideological reasons, but so that they didn't really want to do horrible things to me. It comes to a point where they're begging you to answer the questions. Please, we don't want to keep you in jail anymore. Please, just put your fingerprints here and we'll let you go. Please, please, please.
And you were asking specifically about fingerprinting, is that what you were asking about? Some of the specifics. All of us have done different things. People throughout time have done different methods, for the specific times. We all have different ways of doing things. I've gotten so that I kind of back down to them. I just don't do very much. Kat and Lauren were actually less cooperative, and then sometimes you had bad things happen. Sometimes it opens doors for you. Every level of non-cooperation messes with their system. They want you to have a lawyer. They want you to plea bargain. They want you to do this. Whenever you don't do any of those steps, they get confused, it feels very powerful. We were just telling the story over lunch that Dave Ridley was in there one time, and the atmosphere, the courtrooms are like a church service, a ceremony. They have to have a certain decorum in the room before they usher in the judge. Well, if the decorum never gets, or we had it, the rabble-rousing, the level of tension was going up, and the judge ran out of the room. He ran out so fast, I didn't even see it happening. I was looking this direction. The lady says, "All rise," and the guy ran out of the room. We forced, by public opinion or the atmosphere in the room, a federal judge to run away. And Dave Ridley was left standing there in the middle of the room going, so can I go? And all the secretary, the court people were, I guess. I mean, the judge, there was nothing happened. He just left, and that was it. We all left.
Daryl?
So I had Lauren on my radio show, Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, a few weeks ago. And I had her recount all of her arrests, how many days she spent in jail for each one. And it was determined that she got 192 jail points because she got bonus points for being in federal custody. So I'm curious for the other three, how many times have you been arrested? How many days for each arrest? And what's your total number of days in jail? I have a scratch piece of paper if somebody needs to use it.
For me, it's a bunch of little ones I don't actually remember. I mean, the last time I was in, they just grabbed me, and I was in 5 jails over a 1-month period. And then when I got to Texas, they just let me go. This is the feds. I mean, it's silly.
Yeah, I would have to really sit down and think about it. I mean, it's probably at least 6 arrests at this point. 58 days was my longest stint. I've been in 4 days here, a night there, so over 60 days in jail.
So let me re-ask the question for Russell. What's the most days you've done at one time?
I've never been in there for more than a month at a time.
Okay.
They've just, all my stuff has been so tiny. They throw it out when you get there, or they convict you and let you out. One time, Lauren went to a court where the judge, lots of times by the time you get to the judge, they're smart. They know what's going on. Like that judge knows this is civil disobedience. She wanted to let Lauren go, so she recused herself to go do the math. convicted her of 4 things, gave her 7 days so that it matched to the day, I can let you go today. Because that judge wanted to be the good person and let Lauren
Time
go.
served, as they call it.
Yeah, time served. And it was funny. Were you in the room, or did you hear the police prosecutor lost his mind and started pointing at us? You have to stop this and that. And the rest of his police officers were dragging him out of the court because the judge wanted this to end, right? The judge, this is it. But that wasn't good enough for that one cop. It's funny to watch one guy react, and he just lost it. He was pointing at Dale, Everett, and I, and mad at Lauren, and the rest of the cops were dragging him out of the room.
And
Because we wouldn't stand up for the judge.
Yeah, and I mean, he was also mad that you hadn't filled out enough paperwork or something like that. I mean, but basically, not enough punishment.
And
I don't even know
Derek,
why
I
this
think you
man-
did, 67 days?
It was in that ballpark. I think my longest stint was 50 days. Yeah. Thanks, Daryl. What are some ways that people who are not interested in putting their lives and liberty at risk by doing civil disobedience, what are some ways that those people can help those who are doing civil disobedience? Ian?
You can write to people who are in jail. That is a huge, huge help. If you're sitting in a jail cell, there isn't much to do, especially if they've got you in solitary, as they have done, I know, to Russell and Lauren. Well, you've been in solitary.
Administrative segregation.
You got nothing to do, but they will likely still deliver mail to you. So mailtojail.com is run by Jay. He's in the back row there, and he's doing an amazing job at that activism. It's I think it's some of the most, yes, please, some of the most important but behind the scenes activism. And that's another great example of somebody who's in a support role to really help out, in a critical support role to really help out people who are in a jail cell. Right now, the only person on Mail to Jail is Rich Paul. So, if you don't get a chance to go see Rich, which is another thing you can do, is you can go and visit somebody who's in a jail cell. If you don't get a chance to see Rich, you can just go to mailtojail.com, type up your letter to him, and Jay will take care of the actual work of printing it out, stuffing it in an envelope, addressing it, stamping it, and sending it away for you. So it really takes all the effort out of writing to somebody in jail. I think those are 2 really important things that you can do.
And when you're besides all the support, feeling that people care about you and all that kind of stuff, what we're trying to do is affect people's opinion, right? Well, when you're in jail, it's almost equal how much mail you get and how many visitors you get. Makes people want to be interested. Why on earth are you here, and why do you get more mail than everybody else? Who are you? Why are you in here? It makes the jailers feel uncomfortable, and it's almost like power going into your pocket, all the mail.
The prisoners were calling me like the mayor or something like that because I got all this mail.
So it's just constant what happens with the mail.
Money, something else. So, for instance, Rich Paul is appealing his decision, and that's not a cheap thing to do. The attorney does cost money, and richpaul.freetalklive.com, there's a way that you can donate to help him out with legal fees. Also, helping out on the outside. If you live in New Hampshire, you've got a great liberty community, and if somebody goes to jail, I remember when Sam, a friend of ours, went to jail, he was in there for 58 days for not giving his name, and during that time, he had a cat, and somebody had to feed the cat. So, that's something that, if you got kids, you can bring the kids over and, have them feed the cat. Something everybody can get involved in various different support roles.
Anything to add to ways that people who don't want to do Civ Dis can help those who do?
Yeah, for family and friends of the people who are in jail, if you could, keep their spirits up, talk to them, make sure they're doing okay.
Yeah, when I was in jail, partly why I could go to jail is I knew my wife and Kira, they're not going to starve. People are going to help them. We have friends. It's not, that changes everything when you know you have friends.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about civil disobedience? Do you think some people get the wrong idea about it? Maybe think that's...
I would say the biggest one would be that this is a tool to be used.
Explain that.
That this is just, to me, it's an attitude of not cooperating with the bad guys. Some people want it to be this tool or trick, and they can just destroy you. It's not a guaranteed tool. the system can just kill all of us civil disobedience people if that's the little tool. You know what I mean? It's the spirit. It's the other people that care about you. It's bigger than the individual techniques.
Well, it has to be bigger. I mean, if you want it to be effective, it has to be bigger. It has to have people involved. People have to be supporting it. People have to be there with video cameras. If you can go and do civil disobedience, right now all by yourself, and you'll get no points for it because no one will know, and you'll go to jail, and no one will know you're in jail. I mean, I'm talking about if you don't live in New Hampshire and you don't have a great liberty activist community behind you. There are a lot of important factors to consider.
I'm thinking maybe you and I disagree about this a little bit because in some ways it's not even the volume, it's your attitude or what you were doing than the actual technique of civil disobedience. Some guys will think, okay, I'm going to do civil disobedience and that'll fix them because I've seen that work with other people. No, people can tell your attitude, they can tell why you did it. You can have thousands of supporters. Well, you can get thousands of supporters that follow very violent things,
Yeah, well, I totally agree with you, and that's why I'm so glad that you were one of my influences, because I know I was angry when I moved to New Hampshire, and then I met this guy who's always got a smile on his face, even when the cops are putting him in handcuffs. I mean, he's smiling and laughing with the police, and that to me was a real influence and helped me, I think, find a path to peace. And so, having the right message and having a peaceful message is really critical. Yeah. If you're angry and you're doing civil disobedience, you're bound to get hurt.
You just mentioned it. I want to talk about that. What's your relationship with cops like? Has that changed? And I'm talking about particular individual cops. You've probably encountered them on more than one occasion. Do you develop a rapport as a civil disobedience activist?
With all of us, the cops want to talk to you and be your friend. Some of them want to bust your head in, and then some want to be your friend and feel guilty. I mean, especially you notice inside the jail, if they can talk to you one-on-one and nobody's listening, they'll be kind of like, hey, Russell, you don't belong in this part. And I say, yeah, and neither does anybody else in here. That they're treating you so poorly, and you haven't even gone to trial yet. And that you have to kind of point that out to them because, every guy I know in here, one of the last times I was in the place, they're strip searching the old black guy standing next to me. He's on trial. He might be let go tomorrow. And this is how you're treating him today? And they punished me for that. But what am I supposed to be? I'm supposed to be okay with this? Now you're strip searching us? Oh, this is lots of fun. This is,
So you did develop a relationship with the cops, but it was they punished
every
you
single
for it.
one of these things. What Shane Maxfield, he'll talk to a lot of us. There's cops inside the jail. I've been contacted later. It's
our closing speaker on Sunday is formerly from the jail, Brian Tan, who kept both of us in a jail cell. He'll be our closing speaker, so that should be a very interesting perspective on somebody who's been on the inside and who's now out and speaking out in favor of freedom. So and I've had good conversations with the police, and there are certain cops who won't even talk to me, namely the police chief in this town. He pretends like I don't exist, but most of them are very friendly, and I think that if you aren't coming at them from a position of anger, if you're coming at them from a position of love, then that's going to have to rub off on them, I think, to some extent.
What about you, Lauren? Do you have any relationships with cops?
Well, I can't think of the names of any of the cops that I've dealt with, but in general, you see them, and they're looking at you and hoping that you do that you obey them, and when you don't obey them, they don't know what to do. They you feel sorry for them because they're so confused and they have no other way of dealing with people. I'm going, people, come on. This jail is not normal life, okay? This isn't normal. This police station, this isn't normal. You need to get out and talk to more people.
Thanks for pointing that out. Did jail change you?
Well, yeah, I got to meet all kinds of new people, and it's if you ever get into jail, you'll find that the people that you meet there they're almost all really characters, and they're good with words. They're very generous, and they're it's like going to Hollywood and meeting movie stars. That's kind of.
Ian, did jail change you?
It's an interesting question, and I was fully ready for that experience, and I'm grateful that I had it. I really am. I don't know how much it changed me as much as it was, like Lawrence said, it was just a new set of experiences for me. I went into the jail with a positive mindset. I was going to have as positive an experience as possible as I could inside that facility, and I did. I went in with that mindset, and that's what I experienced. I met interesting people, got all kinds of stories from the other inmates. I just actually saw one of the inmates yesterday when I was at Staples picking up the name tags. I saw Sully, who I was in there with, and he was there with his kid. And I see these guys on the streets, and they remember me. And then I remember that. I don't always remember their names, but they remember, and that's you're making an impact on people, and you're touching people's lives that you never would have had the opportunity to touch, and that includes the jailers as well. I mean, there's no doubt that my conversations and yours, well, probably not yours, but because you and Brian Tan didn't get along in jail, I guess, at one point. But me and Rich Paul had great conversations with this jailer, and now he's left his job. And I know that you had something like that happen too, didn't you? Wasn't there a jail guard who quit his job because of his experience with you at one point?
He quit for other reasons, but just contacted us because...
But he reached out to you.
But he said, I tried to whistleblow on something, and then he says, so I had to leave. So it had nothing to do with me, but he did contact me.
To reach out to you.
I remember you. You don't remember me.
Yeah.
You sat quietly in.
But you had an impact on him, or something like that,
I could figure out which jail he was talking about because of how he described what I was doing and stuff.
I mean, you must have had an impact. He took the time to reach out to you after the fact.
Yeah, it
right?
is funny how the different reactions. And when I'm in jail, I get more radical.
You get more radical, so jail does change you.
Just to let you know, coppers.
Well, I got to read again, which was nice. I never spent any time reading, so I got to really kind of spend time doing that, and that was helpful for me too. So overall, I mean, we call it the Keene Spiritual Retreat here in Keene, and it's kind of a joke, but it's also depends on how you look at it. Do you want to go to an awful jail and have a terrible time, or do you want to go and at least try to make yourself better and enjoy yourself and spread the ideas of freedom while you're in there? And if you do go in, I would like to suggest, don't try to spread the ideas. Just do your own thing and be interesting. Like you were saying earlier, the guards or the guards and the inmates will take an interest in you if you're getting mail or whatever it is that you're doing. Eventually, they're going to ask you, "What are you doing here?" And then you can talk to them about your reason for being in, and etc., and get into those reasons. And
you mentioned that you got to read in jail. In one of my first jail experiences, you were actually in jail and able to pass me a book.
That's right.
That
was against the rules, by the way, passing you I actually had permission from the guard to give that book to you.
Yeah, I learned that later. Thanks. And I appreciated it. I also had time to read. The book was For a New Liberty. Can you talk about some of the literature that's inspired you?
Yes. My favorite... When I got put in solitary confinement, after a few days, they dragged me out again because I thought, hey, as long as I'm in solitary confinement, no one else can be in here, so I'm going to stay. And they go, it's time for you to come out. And I'm going, no, I'll just stay here. So they dragged me out to the secondary place where you're still, under a whole bunch of rules. And it was really strange that I found the book that I was most hoping to find. It was Civil Disobedience by Thoreau. So it's like a Christian finding a Bible in the Colosseum, right? Okay, anyway. Wow. But anyway, yeah. So Thoreau is my big ideological predecessor. He's kind of a local guy. He's into peace. He says the government will fade away when people are ready for it, and I totally agree. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Are we talking about books in general or only books we read in jail?
I'm talking about books in general.
Okay. Healing Our World, still my favorite. Dr. Mary Ruwart, it's just an amazing book that really takes various different issues and approaches them from a position of compassion. If you know any liberals, this is the book, in my opinion, for them. I think she's a great communicator of the ideas of liberty, and highly recommend that. But to the point of Civil Disobedience being on the book cart at jail, here in Keene, obviously we've got a great liberty community here, and there's been a couple times over the last few years where we've done a book drive, and so everybody's always got these extra, liberty. All right, let's throw them in there, and we took a huge tote of books down to the jail, and we've done this more than once. So So when you're in Cheshire County Jail and they bring that book cart around, there's a good chance there's going to be at least one or more freedom-oriented book on there. And plus, there's also all the times we've been in there. So when we're in there, people are sending in books. Like Taryn Lupo sent his Pirates of the Savannah in there, and I read that in like a day. It was so good, and put that on the book cart. And unfortunately, I think one of the guys appropriated it for his lifting, because sometimes they'll do that. They're not supposed to, but they'll take books and they'll put them in a bag and they'll like lift them for weights. But yeah, you'll find all kinds of neat things on the book cart here in Keene.
I read Atlas Shrugged one time in jail. They had one of those. Lots of times I'm in jail. You'll get in solitaire and you'll have no access to books. So usually I can get a Bible, and so I can sit there and read the Bible. So that's helpful, because at least in America, they still let you, even when they're denying you everything else, they'll give you that usually. They kind of feel guilty if they don't do that. But it's kind of funny. But I have read some interesting books in there. And then the book that affected me the most after looking at Gandhi, he learned his stuff from Thoreau and Tolstoy. And Tolstoy's book that's really good about this is The Kingdom of God is Within You. And it's
I read that one in jail. It was great.
Yeah, it's a very logical book, and it's funny. Did you notice in the one of the translations, it says you either hate or love this book, because it's very logical, and either you go, yeah, this is the answer, or you think it's rubbish. So I would highly recommend. It's not a huge book. It was probably banned in Russia at the time. When he became a Christian later on in his life, from a fake Christian to a real one, then he had to go underground. Here's a guy who was famous, wrote big books, and at the end of his life he had to pretend. He had to print his own stuff with his family.
Wow. Mark?
Yeah, I just want to say welcome back to the Shire, Russell. You always sound so reasonable up here on panels. So I guess I want to know, what activism have you found to be most generally and specifically? So I guess there's 4 answers for each person per question. Generally and specifically, what activism have you found to be the most successful and the least successful, not just of yours, but of sort of activism you've seen everywhere?
For me, it's kind of the topic of agorism. Is kind of a big word for it. And what the last panel, making money and, surviving. To me, the civil disobedience is just the extreme end of the spectrum of voluntary transactions that aren't hurting anybody. So I like any activism that doesn't hurt anybody else. And for me, of course, the most powerful has been, if you're willing to go up and poke the bear, a lot changes very quickly, but it's much more painful than just making money and helping your family and helping each other. But that, of course, to me is just the most extreme and best thing, but most people can't do it. All we can do is kind of step that direction.
Was the question most or least popular or successful? I'm sorry. Successful.
For me, popular is successful because we're trying to change everybody's minds.
Yeah.
Partly.
So that's an interesting question, because as I think it was mentioned earlier, it depends on the metrics. It depends on how you're gauging things. So, if we're talking about, for instance, civil disobedience has attracted people here, and I think that it has attracted a certain type of person to this movement that I want to attract. I want the people who are willing to stand up for themselves. That's not to say I don't appreciate folks who are in the support roles, but we've got to have people who are willing to say no and be willing to accept whatever those consequences are that are going to come, because consequences will come. But to pick one particular thing or another, I can't, because again, it would depend on the metrics and how you're measuring things. Obviously, some things upset some people, some things rile others, and some things make others very, very happy. I just try to focus on what I feel is the right thing to do, because I know if I'm being true to myself, then I will attract the people who are appreciating that and the people who are like that. And that's what I want to do.
I think in my experience, I've been like a radical for freedom for many, many, many years, since like 1970 or so. And I was in the Libertarian Party. I wrote letters to the editor, contribute to political campaigns. I think those were the least the least effective things I did because nothing changed in the 1970s, 80s, 90s. Finally, I said, okay, things have gone too far. I got to go put my foot down. And when I went into troublemaking, but getting arrested and saying no to bureaucrats, then wow, everything. I met a million more people. A whole bunch of events pop up and a whole bunch of places to live. In New Hampshire, suddenly now there's a big society of people that do the same thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think the question is including you, Derrick J. Maybe you should answer the question.
I wasn't ready for that, but most and least successful activism. Gosh. Right.
Do you like a certain sort of activism?
Getting out of jail. Yeah.
My favorite kind of activism is him not wearing very much clothes at the airport. I mean, for a long, especially if you bring cute chicks, because it's
idea.
Fun to watch this stuff, and this is the stuff that makes them so uncomfortable. And telling jokes, they don't even want you to tell jokes at the TSA, and that is a good starting point. Plus, people can have fun doing it. Lots of times, civil disobedience or the drama or the kind of street theater is so powerful and fun, and people can smile in an audience. People can smile. It's not militaristic, and it's just fun.
Right on. Generally and specifically, just to answer your question, Mark, I was influenced by civil disobedience. I think the presence of people here today indicates that other people are also motivated by that. Specifically, Andrew Carroll's civil disobedience, I thought was really effective.
Can you describe it for those who aren't familiar?
For those who aren't familiar, Andrew Carroll announced to the police that he was going to be possessing marijuana publicly and on a sidewalk and just hold it. And that's what he did, and they came and arrested him. And that really looks ridiculous to me. I don't know about you, but I think that's an insane waste of time. And he effectively used truth and honesty and media to just put forward his worldview, and I think it really worked. So that's one thing. So we got a question from Dean.
Just to follow up on what Russell just said about street theater, one of my favorites was Your Arrest, Derrick, the Give Peace a Chance that's in your DVD. And I thought that was great because they wanted to, the cops were going to physically restrain you, but the fact that you were singing made them have to follow you around and delay it rather than just do it, because you could tell that they felt how ridiculous it was that they were going to do that to you. But my question was, Ian, you started to touch on it about interactions with other prisoners. I'm curious about their reactions, not only generally your interactions with them, but also their reactions to the fact that you're an activist and doing civil disobedience. Are any of them, do they hold contempt for you? Because I know that part of the reason prison is so scary, or jail is so scary, is not only because of the bad things that the guards will do to you, but because there are bad people in jail. And I understand that there's a culture of pride for being a criminal in many prisons or among prisoners.
So, at least from my limited experience, again, I've only spent about 60-some days in jail. It's important to point out there's differences between jail and prison. Prison in New Hampshire is a place where you're going to spend more than a year. Jail is a place where you'll be there for a year or less, typically. So the kind of people you're dealing with in a jail, in a lot of cases, they're even awaiting trial. They haven't even been sentenced. A number of them are there for nonviolent crimes. Every now and then you'll find somebody who's there for a robbery, but half the time that's motivated by somebody wanting to get some heroin. So, most of these guys aren't real bad guys, at least the ones that I was in there with. And I'm grateful that I was at Cheshire County Jail, and certainly if you go to jail in a place like California, your mileage is going to vary quite a bit. Most of the interactions I had with the prisoners were friendly. They were They were appreciative of the fact that I stood in front of a police car. This is why I went to jail for 58 days. Our friend Heike was in the park, Central Square in Keene, and I was at Social Sundays, and the call went out over the two-way that she was being arrested. So I left my meal and biked down there and stood in front of the police car with 3 other activists. And so those guys appreciated that. I mean, they don't like the cops, most of them. So they were appreciative of that. That they didn't, necessarily, I don't think they necessarily understood what freedom meant after I had left, but maybe they had a better understanding of it, at least on some issues. And like I said, I've got friendly relationships with them all when I see them out on the streets or back in court, as sometimes is the case. So overall, very positive experience with the prisoners there. Did I answer your question? I don't. Okay.
I had one negative experience. The Cheshire County Jail here. When the last time I was in there, some of them had negative reactions to Sam from earlier because he was like a celebrity. He was on the phone, and they didn't like that. Just like kind of the thing of, you don't come into a jail and say, hey, I'm the most important person here and I'm taking over this place. Instead, if you're just mind your own business, then after a while people ask you. But that's the only negative thing I've had, because Sam was in there for good reasons. He wasn't doing any harm, but they did have a funny reaction to him. I don't know if I've told other people that, because when I was in there last time in the new jail, they had said, oh yeah, I remember that Sam guy, and they thought he was kind of... some of them don't like it when you talk about the outside world. They start getting institutionalized, and they don't like to... They talk about what's in there. I'm always talking about what's out there. You're reading books about what's out there, and I've actually had people say, stop talking about out there.
That kind of reminds me of one thing, the institutionalization you're talking about. Some of these guys are in there so often. Well, I remember one of them came into the cell block when he was being brought in, and he comes in and he goes, honey, I'm home. Because he's in there so often. He knows half the guys that are there because it's this revolving door of a system. They get out, they're on probation, and they smoke some pot. They don't pass the P test and VOP, and they're right back in. But there is a factor with some of them where they want to abuse themselves and they want to tell themselves that they're bad. Like you're in there for selling some marijuana or doing something else that has no victim. They have this belief system that it was bad, that they were doing something wrong. And I don't know if you encountered that at all when you were in there. But,
absolutely.
And that was hard to counter that. It really was. I mean, you just had to kind of reassure them, look, you didn't do anything wrong. Like this whole kind of society, this structure, this enforcement structure really does, you would think people in jail would be more open to things like legalization, but you'd be surprised. Many of them are not.
It turns out institutionalization's real. Yeah. You had a question, David?
I was going to ask, could y'all give thoughts about how making people, do you ever worry that people don't understand the message that you're doing in civil disobedience, or that the message is being misunderstood? And I guess that's pretty much it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, David. So I guess the question is, how do you control the message?
What, you just... My favorite strategy is trial and error. So I tried this is my message. And if people didn't get it, or if people were, hostile to it, I'm going, okay, well, what do you think would be better? So I just, ask them what the people who don't seem to agree or don't seem to, understand that what the big deal is. I like to ask them, well, okay, well, what is important then?
One of the things I learned in jail, for sure, and I kind of knew it before I went in, but one of the conversations I had with one of the cooks, Scott, who's really just a hilarious guy, a really fun guy to work with. I was working in the jail kitchen. And I remember he told me about, I guess it was an experience that he had with how he experienced, as someone who worked at the jail, the trespassive 12 arrests that happened when a dozen of us were arrested at the jail just for being in the parking lot, and we had walked around the jail. Actually, that was the day we went to see you, and Russell was in jail, and so we wanted to go see Russell, and we didn't know where he was being held, because all we knew, Russell would say on the phone that he could look at a brick wall. So that's all we knew. So we actually walked around the jail, and we went down the little alcoves, and we found Russell, and it was so rewarding.
Insane. They were that I happened to be looking out the window at the right time, and that's a place that has 2 people that walk down it a day to go get a smoke. I mean, that's how few people I used to see on that.
Yeah, so we found Russell, and we had to walk around the jail. We walked around the jail a couple times. They'd called the cops out, and the cops came, and they arrested us without even warning us. I mean, they're supposed to, if you're trespassing, you're supposed to be warned and given a chance to leave. Well, we all got arrested, and Lauren was one of those who was in the trespass of 12. But the perspective of the guy who is the jail chef was that this was, some ridiculous occasion. But the reason why he didn't understand was because he hadn't seen the whole story. He didn't know what the whole story was. All he knew was there was a bunch of troublemakers that had been arrested at the jail. And so because I was one of those people, I got to tell him while I was, cooking a bunch of eggs, and he was there, and we had a nice long conversation where I had the chance to explain the whole story from beginning to end, why we were there, why we were arrested, the ridiculous reasons the police arrested us. And by the time I was done telling the full story, he was on our side. And so he totally understood, and he thought it was outrageous what had happened. So I think one of the biggest issues is that if the person in the case doesn't, or the person we're talking about doesn't know what the whole story is, they can't judge accurately the situation. So they're going to make judgments, and those judgments are going to be based on a lot of misinformation, a lot of things that they've heard people say that may not necessarily be true, their misinterpretation of one video clip that'll go out there, which is one of the reasons why Derrick J's Victimless Crime Spree was so important, because it told at least more of the story. We can't tell the whole story in an hour and a half, but we told a big story instead of just a chunk. If you go to freekeene.com, you'll see bits of story, and if you watch over time, you'll get the whole story. But most people don't put that kind of time in. So ultimately, all we can do is the best we can at telling our stories, and hope that people will be interested enough to pay close enough attention to get it. Because even in the case of your movie, Derrick, we still get a bunch of crap from people about scenes in that movie.
That's right.
Like the crossing guard scene is the most controversial scene in the whole movie. And people, you can tell them the truth about it, and then they don't even want to believe the truth.
That's the case, yeah. Russell, tell us a little bit about what it was like looking out the window and seeing the trespass of 12, or this group of people. I mean, what was that like? What were you feeling?
Wild to see people that had come to visit, because I didn't know they were coming that day. I mean,
you had no clue, and you're looking out the window, and here's a bunch of your friends?
Yeah, I didn't know, because, I mean...
What were you feeling?
Because also, when you're in there, sometimes you don't even know what's going on the outside. Sometimes you're not allowed to talk to anybody or get any mail, or, it's different every time you go in there, especially if you're a little bit uncooperative. I mean, who knows what can,
And you would say you were more than a little bit uncooperative?
Well, sometimes it doesn't take any.
I see.
I think in that jail, actually, I had a really big dilemma at that new jail when I moved from the old jail to new, because I got put in solitaire just for waiting, and I almost didn't want to leave because nobody else had ever used that toilet. Wow. It was a brand new jail, brand new clothes. I mean, you go to jail, you get underwear that's shreds and that sort of stuff.
Don't wear those underwear.
That's a good tip. Gross. Yeah, to talk about jail clothes, I think we should go through that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so it's also, it's funny how also talking about civil disobedience degrades into talk about jail conditions, because that's what happens to you.
You're going to end up there, so let's talk about it.
It was funny, because that jail, I almost didn't leave solitaire because I'm by myself. They brought me, the food was good in the new jail, and I had a couple books, and the place was clean. So, that was wild. I almost didn't want to leave, but...
A jail clothing tip, number 25. They don't give you any dental floss, but if your pants are raggedy, you can pull the threads off the bottom of your pants. Use it for dental floss.
Yep. You can usually order dental floss later. Your first week is always the toughest week because there's commissary, as they call it. And, they got this touchscreen ordering system, but they always make you wait a week out. And there's just only one day that the orders go out on. So if the orders go out on Tuesday and you come in on Wednesday, then you've got to wait an extra week. But eventually you can get deodorant, you can get dental floss, and things aren't so bad. It's not... in Cheshire County, again, it's called the Keene Spiritual Retreat for a reason. If you're going to go to jail, and I don't recommend it, but if you do intend to do civil disobedience, you're probably going to see the inside of a jail cell. There are a lot worse places where you could do time, namely Manchester's Valley Street Jail, where they apparently murder one of their prisoners every month, at least according to some of the people that have been in there. Also in Manchester's Valley Street, you cannot visit people every day. You can visit people every day in Cheshire County. So if you want to go see Rich Paul on a Sunday this weekend, you can go see him, and there's multiple hours every day. It's still an impersonal visit because you've got a video screen. I mean, it's not the best visit in the world, but it's better than having to wait until Saturday afternoon from 3 to 5 when only 2 people can go in, or whatever ludicrous restrictions they have at Manchester. And I don't know about the rest of the jails in the state, but you can do a lot worse. And as Russell said, the food really isn't that bad at Cheshire. Yeah, I mean, I was actually kind of bummed when I had to go home because, I'm terrible. I don't cook for myself, and I'm like, oh man, I don't get 3 square meals a day anymore. And that's part of the institutionalization, People bring you meals, you got a place to sleep.
But some of the jails, all you get is bread and cheese and bologna over and over again, and that's all you get.
Jail food tip number 24. Don't eat for a couple days, and the food tastes really, really wonderful.
Daryl?
Okay, sort of a shameless plug. Several of you mentioned the Thoreau book on civil disobedience. I actually have that book for sale. And Russell, you mentioned going to TSA and doing something. I realized that this panel has sort of been lighthearted. There was actually a TSA agent who was off duty who shot another TSA agent in LA today. Do you think that the TSA will now start groping your balls before you leave your house? Because walking, after all, is a form of transportation.
Well, the airports are different. I mean, the reason I did my first thing at the airports is because that's where a lot of us meet the police state. The airports are different because the government always owns the airport. So that's why I've heard talk of different parts of the travel industry trying to have their own version of security checkpoints, because who wants to travel from Europe to here to get groped? I mean, they're really worried about that kind of stuff. I don't know why the government would give up, because they like it so much. I think they hire perverts on purpose. I mean, the more I look at it, that's what they want.
You've referenced it a couple times. What did you do in the airport for our folks that do that?
The first thing that I ever did where I was risking the government doing bad something to me was after the Real ID, I tried to get on a plane without them patting me down. I got visited at work by 2 FBI agents, and they discussed what was happening, and they said, well, we understand, because these FBI guys are not stupid. One of them is that Chris Jansen guy.
Phil Christiana?
Yeah, it's Christiana. Okay, so they came and visited me, and they were looking at me. They one of the questions they said was, so you don't pay income taxes, right? And I said, no. And I said, well, then why'd you ask? Aren't you supposed to call up the IRS and do something? And no, I just figured. And then they said, but they kept going, but why the airports? We wouldn't have to do anything to you if it wasn't the airport. And I said, that's the problem, is that the airport is where the bad things are happening. This is where the tyrannies, you're putting the screws to us. So I went there. They had a whole bunch of, there was media, and there was a whole bunch of federal agents there. And they all pretended there was not a lot of them, but if you were to pan the room, it'd be all these people you've met in all these federal courtrooms throughout, and we got followed by the 2 FBI agents from Keene, Keystone Cops kind of style, from Keene to Manchester. I wish we would have filmed it. It's hard to even believe it happened. They followed us all the way there. As we left our neighborhood, Kat said, I think those guys are going to follow us. And I said, that's stupid. They're just sitting there. It's so obvious. Now they followed us. So 2 cars followed us all the way there. They did stupid stunts here in Tyrone. We ditched them in Dublin. We tried to go into the police department and say, hey, some people are following us. There was nobody there, so we just used the restroom in the library. they must have gone past us, so we caught up to them later, and they were following us and doing stupid little maneuvers, and finally we were waving to the one lady behind us, and she finally gave up and just waved to us. But the two FBI guys that I had met, I didn't know they were following us. At one of the intersections, we're sitting at the intersection, and they're both sitting in a car looking this direction, not looking at the green light. And then when we got to the airport, they were parked next to Biker Bill, who does videos. He's not here today. But they were parked next to him. Hey, Bill, we're talking to that. Oh, those are the two FBI agents that visited me. And they wouldn't come out of the car. They just sat there getting hotter and hotter and hotter while we talked because they're trying to pretend. And then we go in, and they're just one of the 20 people. I don't know why they felt like they needed to be. I don't know why they followed us. I don't know why they thought they needed to hide from us. And then went in there. They shut down the TSA line, the one I went into. They were planning on me being there. And the first guy was okay. The second woman was terrified, the TSA woman. Terrified. She was trembling. And I thought it was because she was saying, I recommend you divest yourself of all your things. Because they were prepared for me. And her bosses were watching. I thought she was nervous because everybody was watching her. Kat thinks she was nervous, and I agree. She thought this was the first terrorist she ever met. I mean, she looked at me like I'm going to bomb the plane. And that's now that when Kat mentioned that's what because they don't know. These guys are really bad at security. They're not good at this. And they thought me, a person who's telling them what I'm doing, I'm wearing no clothes, I'm wearing hardly any clothes, not carrying a bag, and they were so worried about me. Although I did get the Bible through without going on the conveyor belt and, and that sort of stuff. And when I went to court, the judge went through the whole scenario and found it very amusing. And he says, so he got through the metal detector. And then he convicted me of trespassing, but then I got time served of 2 days. So
interesting.
And that was the first time I did anything. And
wow.
it was scary the first time you go into jail. Some people have experienced it for longer than me, but the first time you go in there and that door clinks closed, and all I know is the feds put me there for holding. Am I going to leave another place? I mean, I've had Fed guys say, oh, also, in case you guys haven't had this, we're all here coming to New Hampshire to be together. I had Fed guys go, oh, we're going to haul you a long ways away so you won't have any friends. And I'm going, oh, they'll send me to California, where I'm from. And I'll actually have more people that could visit me, but they didn't know that. But they said that. I mean, and they diesel you. They do whatever it takes because that's the thing is all of our little techniques aren't assured to work, right? We can all amass here. They can take 100 of us activists and put us in Eastern Europe and make us disappear without even, we're a blip on the screen. But it's the attitudes. And people will care why we disappeared. But, I guess I'm on a rabbit trail. But that's what happens to you,
Yeah, sure does. Well, thank you for sharing the story about the TSA encounter. Looks like we got another question.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm certainly one of the people that's been inspired by civil disobedience, even though I don't necessarily plan to do it myself. So thanks. Because I never would have even heard of the Free State Project or anything had it not been for
some of us
your
don't
activism.
plan it. It's just the bad. Yeah. They're so bad.
Well, great. So first of all, thanks for that. So second of all, I feel a sense of loss that you all have moved out of New Hampshire before I've even moved here. So I hope that you come back. Maybe you'll answer as to whether you will or not.
Well, I'm temporarily gone, but that's it.
Oh, okay, just temporarily. Well, I know Derrick's not either, so. But I know you plan on coming back. Anyway, what I wanted to know is, do you feel like the burnout with civil disobedience or more public activism, do you think that comes more from the state's response to it or your fellow liberty activists criticizing you for so-called poisoning the well and that sort of thing?
Interesting.
For me, right now, more people are counting on me. At the time, I was more free to be in jail. I'm not burned out at all. I mean, it's way too powerful. The effect you have on the system, the guards, the jail, the court. No, I mean, it's just like for me right now. But you can't choose that kind of stuff. People like Martin Luther King Jr. had to choose. His family is getting threatened. I mean, so it is hard.
What did you mean when you said burnout? I don't want to jump to a conclusion there.
All I mean is unwilling to do more civil disobedience, or perhaps, you don't seem like none of you seem like you want to throw your hands up to the idea of civil disobedience, but more the lack of willingness to continue to pursue civil disobedience in your own life, I guess.
It's not a lack of willingness at all. It's hard to start. It's hard to say. It's hard to obey once you're used to not. And once you start saying no and standing up for yourself, it becomes a habit. And it can be a dangerous habit because you might go to jail again and again. When I was on a suspended sentence, I told myself I wanted to be more cautious, but I just can't back down in a lot of instances. And, a lot of times you say no. And I'd like to clarify something. We've been talking a lot about civil disobedience, but I think one of the most important things and sort of sub-conversations is non-cooperation. And non-cooperation, civil disobedience is like where, like you talked about with Andrew Carroll announcing in advance that he was going to go hold some marijuana out in his hand. That's a real classic kind of civil disobedience. But non-cooperation is like, well, I'm filming in the court, I'm on a suspended sentence, and there's this cop that gets up in my face and tells me to turn the camera off. I keep recording. That's non-cooperation. I didn't plan to do that in advance, but when given the threat of the action of the state, I did what I felt was the right thing to do.
Also, the non-cooperation won't get you in jail as much as the poking them.
That's certainly true.
Because when you think about it, in some ways, if the government gives ground, it'll seem like you're doing less, but it's working better.
Yeah, so no, I mean, I still say no, and I understand what that can do. Like, for instance, while I was on that suspended sentence is when I got arrested with Derrick and Kelly at the courthouse for trespassing, because we had this no trespass order. It's gone over in the movie. If you haven't seen it yet, you should check it out. But, I knew there was a good chance I was going to get arrested going in there that day, and I did it anyway. So I'm definitely not out of the game or anything like that.
Yeah, I think that that the response from the other activists and other free staters and other liberty-leaning people has been nothing but good. That doesn't stop me from doing civil disobedience, and the police crack down on people, threatening you with more and more higher penalties, like they did to Derrick J. That really doesn't stop me either. I think the biggest thing that stops me nowadays is that I have a home and a family, and that I don't want to leave them for 90 days or whatever.
Ian said it gets hard to stop saying no, and I feel the same way. It sort of becomes an infinite loop where I'm just more emboldened by everything that they throw at me. Unfortunately, I'm in a suspended sentence situation right now, and that's caused me to just relocate, stay out of the game for a little while, and focus on producing media instead of doing civil disobedience. But no, I still think it's super effective, and it's still in my heart. And yeah, I'll be back in New Hampshire to do more.
One of the things that Lauren and I never had was never having to. We never agreed to anything, so you never had anything hanging over your head. It's definitely nice. That's another level of non-cooperation. If you never plea, if you never sign things, it's amazing how it turns out better for you. Also. Because it's hard for families, I consider every single guy in Keene is responsible to do civil disobedience. I figure that it's the least you can do. Also, I think when I'm old, I'm just going to go head on into the White House. I'm not going to die of cancer. Oh man, it's much more fun. Just head right for the White House. I'll go so quick.
You want to wrap us up with the last question here?
Well,
make it a good one.
Yeah, this is it's very on topic. I guess starting with what Mark said about success and that you have to define success. And for me, that means movers. And I think across the board, if you ask people, again, how did I hear about the Free State Project? What caused me to move? It was almost always one of the more radical happenings that did that, including the three of you when I was still in Arizona. I mean, those were the things that got my attention and made me say, wow, these are the kind of people that I want to be around. Maybe there are some, but I haven't heard anyone say, boy, someone wrote a letter to the editor and it was just so dead on. And I was like, I got to move to New Hampshire because of that letter. You know what they did? They went and testified at the city council, and man, I decided to pack up my life and move to New Hampshire.
But
I don't know where those people are. I haven't seen them. So to me, there's a group who doesn't need to be named because everyone knows who they are, who is constantly down on from what I can tell, anything that's radical. And it blows me away that they continue to say things like, you're turning people off. And for people who are supposed to be logical and reasonable, for them to just make open-ended, what are really ridiculous statements like, well, I was at work and somebody said, the crossing guard, and you're like, oh my God, like I didn't come to New Hampshire to impress the people you work with. So what you're telling me is you work with some statists who weren't impressed with activism? Oh my God, I'm shocked.
Yeah.
Like, do I really care? No, I don't. I want more people, like you said, who are radical to come, and you get that way, right, by doing more radical things, in my opinion, and that kind of leads to something that I've noticed, and that's that in the early days, these things were happening like every week. I mean, whether it was we were at one with busloads of people, we were at one jail, we were at another jail, we were at that court, we were not standing for that judge, we were not taking off our hats, we were throwing snowballs at the federal building. I mean, it was just endless.
And we won that snowball fight. That's the important
part. Right. It was absolutely endless. And that's really died down. Why do you think that is?
Well, some of us were hoping that we just get the ball rolling and then other people would do it, and then other people don't do it. That's an indictment on some of the new people. Because that's what makes people in the tipping point of why people move. Also, when I moved here, I thought everybody was going to be as crazy and radical as me, because why do you move across country and leave your family behind if you're not going to be nuts? But it's fine to have normal families and stuff. But yeah, I guess that's what things like this, we're trying to inspire more people to do stuff because it works. I mean, for me also, I have to admit I've come back the last couple of times and some people have said it's not the same since, my wife and I were gone or stuff. That shows you the ripples. The little bit that we were doing, right, it's not much, but it had a lot of effect, and all of us are like, right, I mean, if somebody goes in jail, you feel it. But it is growing. I mean, I can encourage you guys, too, when I come back, it's fun to know that your thing's successful now. I mean, we used to we used to sit in meetings and go, well, I wonder if a thing could work in Manchester. It's fun to know it has.
That's you ask an interesting question. I feel like there have been, as I mentioned earlier, these different waves of activists that have come in. I mean, once you get enough suspended sentences, you have to cool down, and that's obviously what happened with Derrick J, and has happened to all of us. And maybe Russell's right that we don't have enough new blood who's willing to take those sorts of risks. Maybe that's a statement that we're getting more people with families and things like that now, than the average kind of got nothing to lose, anarcho Jesse kind of single mover types. So that could be a factor. And also, maybe they're getting a little smarter, instead of arresting. Like, for instance, I know I was pulled over with Nemi on the way back from Concord, and this cop leans in and he threatens me, I'm going to arrest you if you keep recording. And I moved in a little closer to get a better shot of him. And he didn't do anything to me. And the same thing with the other cop in the courtroom that came right up into my face and threatened me with an arrest if I didn't stop recording. And I didn't stop recording, and he backed down. So maybe there are more instances that are like that 5 years ago or 6 years ago would have resulted in the activists being arrested, but now perhaps, I'm just totally speculating, perhaps they're taking a little more of a discretionary approach. But, who's going to be the next Derrick J, the next victimless crime star, so to speak? And maybe it's also shifted into other things. Obviously, the Robin Hooding thing here in Keene isn't really civil disobedience, but it certainly turned into as controversial in some ways of a form of activism. So I feel like there's still a lot of buzz happening, but maybe not so much focused on someone getting arrested. And maybe there's nobody out there that feels real passionate about one particular issue to where they say, that's what I want to go out and do. I want to make that my issue and put myself on the line, because for it to be civil disobedience, that's what it has to be. But there are still plenty of examples of non-cooperation that in many cases aren't resulting in arrests. So maybe that's a good thing.
They
seem to have stopped messing with people who are chalking.
Well, we've never really had problems in Keene with people being chalking and having issues.
It is a good question, and there are lots of questions. We won't get to all of them. It is 4:20, and we do have to wrap up this panel, so I want to thank you for your interest.
I'd like to hear Lauren's answer, actually, to the question, and yours as well, if you don't mind. I mean, we've got a few minutes. Carla, you don't start till 5:30, so we've got... 4:30. 4:30, sorry, 4:30. I don't even know what time it is. 4:30, so... yeah, we've got a few minutes.
So the fact that there's not any civil disobedience happening, or as much now, it's your opportunity. Look, it's now if you ever felt the urge to, say no to bureaucrats or throw snowballs at the federal building, now's your opportunity.
Why does there seem to be less civil disobedience than in the past? I don't know. I don't know. That was my answer.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the questions. Thanks, panelists, for your wonderful answers. And Carla will be speaking in just 10 minutes. Hang tight.
Give another round of applause to the Civil Disobedience panel. And just a reminder, you do have a few minutes to go to the restroom, grab some water, whatnot, before Carla comes up to give the very first ever State of the Free State address.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeene.com. Freekeene.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeene.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeene.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.